Here we're taking a look at the economic growth model and its prediction of catching up. So that being that the idea that developing nations with low real GDP per capita at a period of time should experience higher growth rates in real GDP per capita as compared to developed nations. And we're given this data set here for real GDP per capita in 1960 for a variety of countries, as well as their growth in GDP per capita between 1960 and 2011, and asked to determine whether or not this is consistent with the economic growth model's prediction. So if we want to look at this, let's take a look at first these real GDP per capitas. And what we can see here is it's listed in ascending order. So China had the lowest real GDP per capita, but they now have the highest growth rate. So what we can conclude from that is that China does follow this. It appears to be consistent with that idea. Uganda, on the other hand, with a really low GDP per capita and also a low growth rate as compared to China and Ireland in the United States. So Uganda, on the other hand, wouldn't necessarily follow this growth rate or this economic growth model. Madagascar as well wouldn't follow that because what we see is they experienced negative growth in real GDP per capita. So that wouldn't suggest anything to us that they are catching up to these developed nations. So that's a little bit concerning. If we look at Ireland, well, we could probably conclude that Ireland and the United States were already developed at this time, or at least fairly developed. And what we see from this is that they're still experiencing relatively high growth rates as compared to Uganda and Madagascar. China, it seems to be the outlier here. So what we can conclude here is that this doesn't necessarily follow this economic growth model. So we could say that it's inconsistent simply because we're not seeing any similarity across here. We're not seeing a great pattern of growth in real GDP per capita as compared to what that real GDP per capita was at one point in time. So this particular data set does not suggest consistency with the economic growth model's prediction of catching up.